This is social distancing project number 8. In this house, I'm going to be doing lath and plaster repair. I'm going to be painting the living room and the dining room. Now, this house, it was built in 1906. It was said that this house was moved from Signal Hill in about the early 1920s when Signal Hill discovered oil. Now, there was such a mad rush to sink wells and pump the oil out. The houses that were there were either demolished or they were moved. So this is one of the homes that was moved from Signal Hill. And rumor has it that most of the houses that were in Signal Hill were going to be large mansion type homes, and a lot from the Victorian era. So this happens to be one that my brother and his wife bought back in 1971. And this is the first house that we came to when we moved to California from Alabama. We got here a few days before school started, and as luck would have it, I was out playing near the fence near the driveway, and there was a big piece of wood out there, and of course I was told not to play on it, but you know, being 12 years old, who listens? So in playing on it, it fell on my foot. So the very next day I had to go to school, and of course I had a limp, and most of the kids were looking at me like I was a crippled or something like that. And since I didn't know them, I couldn't go up to each one of them and say, hey, you know, I just had an accident, you know, I'm not going to be walking with a limp forever, so you don't have to look at me and feel pity. But anyway, this was a house that I did a lot of hanging out at. I ate here, I babysit the kids. Even though I was young, I was still a babysitter, because I guess a lot of people saw it that being from Alabama at the age of 12, I'm sure I was a lot more older, well, not older, but more mature than a lot of other kids at 12 years old. But anyway, I was the designated babysitter. I would come over here and eat. I would hang out. This house is in the neighborhood where I did most of my hanging out, where a lot of my friends lived. So I spent a lot of time here. So it's really interesting that, you know, 40 plus years later, I find myself doing this kind of work. Now, had you told me, or anyone told me when I was 12 years old I would be repairing this house that I'm doing a lot of hanging out at, I would have never believed it. As it turns out, I do like repair work, and since this house holds so many memories for me, and it's such a great house, great old house, which is why I'm having to do so much work to it. So as you can see here, I'm having to scrape out all the areas that are cracked before I paint it. Now, I didn't know I was going to have to do all this work, because as you can see, as I start scraping, actually the plaster comes out really easy, because that's the problem with it. Because with the lath and plaster, and this of course is pre-drywall, when the lath lets go of the plaster, it actually will crack. And with us being in Southern California, the cracks come pretty frequently, because Southern California moves and we get cracks. So what I'm doing, I'm taking all of the plaster off down to the lath, because when I get ready to repair it, I'm going to need a place for the plaster to hold on. Actually, I'm not putting plaster back. I'm using 5-minute and 20-minute, because the holes are pretty big. I want to actually get some 5-minute in, and that dries pretty quick, and I can go over that with 20 minutes, so I can work with it a little more. But there were cracks all over the living room walls, as you can see here, so I'm just going through and taking care of all of that. Now, since they are pretty large, I went ahead and stuck some screws into the lath so that the plaster or the 20-minute will have something to hold on to, because when you put it in, you're supposed to actually get it in between the lath. That's why it's spaced apart, so it would actually hold the plaster, or in my case the 20-minute, because once it dries, it needs to hold on to something. And of course, over the ages, as it dries, it gets more brittle, because I don't know what was used back in the early 1900s, but it actually became very crumbly, and it just kind of peeled out or flaked out as I scraped it. So it's well past time. So instead of putting paint right on top of what I have here, I wanted to flatten out the wall as best I could and get rid of the cracks, because other cracks will happen over a period of time, since I'm not taking the lath and the plaster off and replacing it with drywall. Now hopefully when it needs repairing again, maybe it will get some drywall put up. Who knows? I don't know that I'll be around. I was telling my nephew, who's helping me today, that if it needs repairing in the future, or when it needs repairing in the future, he will more than likely do it unless someone is hired out, because I'm trying to show him some of the tips and techniques that I've been using so that hopefully he'll pick it up and carry on, because he seems like he's pretty interested in doing these kind of things. So hopefully that's what will happen. So at this stage, I'm just adding my 5-minute in and letting that set up. And of course that goes off in 5 minutes. So once I go all around and close all the big holes up, I'll come back with some 20-minute, so that will help me smooth it out. And once that happens, the next stage will be some primer. Then I can get to painting. But this whole process here has taken about 4 or 6 hours. So I wanted to make sure I got everything that could cause trouble coming up. So I'm pretty much finished with that. So I'm just about at the end of this video. So what you'll see in the end is just what the walls look like now that I have my 20-minute and my 5-minute on. So the next stage in the next video will be primer and then painting and things like that. So everything is pretty much primed except a couple doors and a window that I didn't have time to do before I had to take off. So the next video will be part 2, where you see primer and paint and putting everything back together and changing out a few light fixtures and things like that. So come back for part 2.